When December comes, my house always feels a little different. The air carries that quiet stillness that only winter brings, the kind that makes you want to sit by the window with a blanket and a cup of tea. Every year, I take out the same old box from the cupboard, the one marked Christmas, and I start decorating. The ornaments are faded now, a little cracked at the edges, but I can't throw them away. Each one holds a memory. The silver star that my son, Daniel, made in school when he was 7. The paper snowman he drew when he was learning to write his name. Even the crooked wreath we made together on a cold afternoon when it snowed for the first time in years. I still remember that day so clearly. His cheeks were red from the cold, and he laughed every time I dropped the ribbon. "You're terrible at this, Mom," he said, and I told him I was better at baking than crafting. We made hot chocolate afterward, and he said it was the best day of his life. I didn't know then how much that memory would mean to me later, when laughter became rare between us. This year, like every year, I put that same wreath on the front door. The neighbors wave, and they always ask, "Will Daniel be coming home this year?" I smile politely and say, "I hope so." But deep down, I already know the answer. He hasn't come home for Christmas in almost 6 years. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when Daniel and I were close. After his father passed away, it was just the two of us. We didn't have much, but we had each other. I worked long hours at the local bakery, and he studied hard. He was a bright boy, full of dreams. When he got his scholarship to university in London, I cried with pride. He hugged me and said, "Mom, I'll make you proud, I promise." And he did, at least for a while. At first, he called me every evening. We'd talk about his classes, the city, and how expensive everything was. I'd send him little packages, biscuits, socks, sometimes just handwritten notes. Then, as the years passed, the calls became less frequent. He said he was busy. New friends, new job, new life. I told myself, that's how it goes. Children grow up. They move on. But I never stopped waiting for the sound of his voice. The first Christmas he missed, he said he couldn't afford the train ticket. I understood. The second year, he said he had to work. The third, he didn't say anything at all. Just a short message on my phone. "Merry Christmas, Mom. Love you." I sat at the kitchen table that night, surrounded by the smell of roast chicken and candles burning low, and I cried. Not because he wasn't there, but because I realized how far apart we'd grown without even noticing. Every Christmas since then, I've prepared the same meal, his favorite. Roast chicken with garlic butter, mashed potatoes, and the apple pie he used to sneak a piece of before dinner. I set the table for 2, just in case. I tell myself that if I stop setting his place, it means I've given up hope. And I can't do that. Not yet. Sometimes, when the house is too quiet, I replay his old voicemails. There's one where he sounds happy. "Hey Mom, I'm on my way home. Can you make that pie again?" I listen to it over and over, and for a few seconds, it feels like he's still that same boy who laughed when I dropped the ribbon. My friends tell me I should stop waiting. They say I've done my part as a mother, that it's time to think of myself. But how do you stop being a mother? Even when your children forget you, your heart doesn't. It still beats for them. Last week, I went into town to buy a small gift just in case Daniel decided to surprise me. I chose a navy blue scarf. It looked warm, something he could wear on those cold London mornings. As I walked home, snow started to fall. I looked up, and for a moment, I felt like time had paused. The whole street was quiet, soft, almost peaceful. I whispered, "Come home, Daniel." I don't know if anyone heard me, but I meant it with every part of my heart. That night, I wrapped the scarf carefully, tied it with red ribbon, and placed it under the small tree in the corner of the living room. I've done that every year too. One gift, always waiting for him. Sometimes I wonder what he thinks of me now. Does he remember the woman who taught him how to tie his shoes, who stayed up late helping him finish his homework? Or does he only see the mother who called too much, who worried too much, who couldn't understand his new life? I wish I could tell him that I only ever wanted him to be happy. It's strange how love works. You give everything, and even when there's nothing left, you keep giving. Maybe that's what being a parent means, to keep loving even when it hurts. A few days before Christmas, I received a card in the post. It had no return address. The handwriting was familiar. My heart skipped. Inside it said, "Merry Christmas, Mom. I'm sorry." That was all. No signature, but I knew. It was his. I sat by the window holding that card, tracing the words with my fingers. I thought about all the things I'd say if he walked through the door. "It's all right, Daniel. You don't need to be sorry. Just come home." But the days passed, and the door stayed closed. Still, I kept preparing. I cooked the chicken, mashed the potatoes, baked the pie. I lit the candles and turned on the soft music we used to play. The clock ticked slowly, and the snow outside began to fall heavier. Every sound made my heart jump. A car passing, footsteps outside, even the wind brushing against the window pane. But it was never him. When the night grew quiet, I sat at the table and whispered grace. I thanked God for giving me another Christmas, for keeping my son safe wherever he was, and for teaching me patience. And even though the chair across from me was empty, I smiled, because somehow I felt he knew I was waiting. There was a time when Daniel and I talked about everything. I knew all his dreams, his fears, even the little things like how he hated raisins in bread pudding, or how he liked his tea, 2 sugars, a dash of milk. But slowly, our conversations changed. They became shorter, quieter, filled with pauses that didn't used to be there. I remember the first time I noticed it. He had come home one summer after university. I had saved up for weeks to make his favorite meals and even repainted his old room. I wanted everything to feel the way it used to be. When he arrived, he looked different. Taller, sharper somehow. His hair was cut short, and he carried himself with this confidence that made me proud, but also a little afraid. We sat in the kitchen, and I asked him about his classes. He smiled politely and said, "They're fine, Mom." That was it. Just fine. No stories, no laughter. I kept waiting for him to tell me something more, but he didn't. After dinner, he went out to meet his friends. I watched him from the window, walking away down the street, phone in hand, not even looking back. That night, I sat on his bed for a long time, looking at the photos on the wall. Pictures of us at the seaside, of him in his school uniform, his graduation cap slightly tilted. I wondered when my little boy had turned into a man I barely recognized. The next morning, I made him breakfast. He barely touched it. "I'll grab something later," he said. I tried to smile, but it hurt. "You used to love my pancakes," I said softly. He shrugged and said, "Yeah, I'm just not that hungry." I told myself it was normal. He was growing up. He had his own life now. But still, it felt like a door had quietly closed between us. Over the years, that door stayed shut. Every phone call seemed to end a little quicker than the last. Sometimes he sounded distracted, like he was somewhere else, talking to someone else while I spoke. I'd ask how he was eating, how work was going, whether he was sleeping enough. He'd laugh and say, "Mom, you worry too much." One day I asked if he'd met someone special. There was a pause. "Yeah," he said. "Her name's Lily." I smiled and said, "That's lovely, Daniel. When can I meet her?" He hesitated. "Maybe another time, Mom. She's a bit busy." I could tell from his tone that something had changed. The next few months, he called less and less. When I did hear from him, he mentioned Lily often. She sounded like a lovely young woman, clever, ambitious, from a good family. But I also sensed that she didn't think much of me. The few times I spoke to her on the phone, her voice was polite, distant. Once when I asked how they were, she said, "We're fine, Mrs. Turner. Daniel's doing really well. You must be proud." There was something in her voice that made me feel small, like I was being patted on the head by a stranger. That Christmas, I invited them both home. I cleaned every corner of the house, bought new curtains, even borrowed an extra heater so their room would be warm. I cooked for 2 days straight. But 2 days before Christmas, Daniel called. "Mom, something came up. We can't make it." I tried to keep my voice steady. "Oh, that's all right, love. Maybe next year." After we hung up, I stood in the kitchen, staring at the pot of soup still simmering on the stove. The smell filled the room, warm and rich, but suddenly I couldn't bear it. I turned off the heat and sat down, holding my apron to my face to stop myself from crying. The next morning, I packed the soup into containers and took it to the community center. I told the volunteers it was extra food from home. They thanked me, and I smiled, but my heart felt hollow. Months passed before I heard from Daniel again. When he finally called, his voice was cheerful, almost too cheerful. "Mom, I've got news. Lily and I are getting married." I froze for a second. "Oh, that's wonderful, darling. When's the wedding?" He hesitated again. "We're keeping it small. Just close friends, her family, a few colleagues." I felt something twist inside me. "What about me, Daniel?" I asked quietly. There was a pause. "Of course, Mom. You'll be there. I'll send you the details soon." But the details never came. I found out later through a mutual friend that the wedding had already happened. I saw one photo on social media. Daniel in a suit, Lily in a white dress, both smiling. I stared at that picture for a long time. Not because I wasn't invited, but because I realized I didn't recognize that smile anymore. That night, I sat by the window looking at the stars. I whispered to myself, "He's happy. That's what matters." But my heart didn't believe it. It kept asking, what did I do wrong? After the wedding, Daniel moved further away, emotionally more than anything. His calls became rare. When he did call, it was often short. "Can't talk long, Mom, I'm heading out." Sometimes I'd hear Lily's voice in the background, laughing or talking to someone else. I'd say, "Tell her I said hello." And he'd say, "Yeah, I will." Once I asked if I could visit them in London. He paused and said, "Maybe later, Mom. The flat's small, and Lily's parents are coming next month." I said it was fine. But after we hung up, I sat on the edge of my bed and whispered, "You don't have to make excuses, love. I'd still love you anywhere." Then came the Christmas that broke me. I had written him a long letter that year, handwritten, on real paper. I told him I missed him, that I was proud of him, that no matter what, this would always be his home. I posted it a week before Christmas. I never got a reply. When Christmas Day came, I still prepared everything as usual. I even set out his favorite mug. The snow fell heavy that night, the kind that makes the world silent. I sat by the tree, the lights twinkling softly, and listened for the sound of a car outside. Midnight came and went. The next morning, I found an envelope under the door. It wasn't from Daniel. It was from the neighbor's boy who helped with errands. Inside was a small card from Daniel and Lily. It said, "Merry Christmas, Mom. Hope you're well. Love, D&L." That was it. No visit, no call, just that small, impersonal note. Still, I placed it on the mantelpiece beside the others. Because even if it hurt, it was still something from him. After that year, I started to hear from him even less. Sometimes months would go by. When he did call, it felt forced, like something he had to do, not something he wanted to. I tried not to ask too many questions. I didn't want to push him away completely, but one day I couldn't help it. "Daniel, do you ever think of home?" There was a pause. "Of course I do, Mom, but things are busy here. You wouldn't understand." "I'd like to," I said softly, "if you let me." He sighed. "Mom, I'm not a kid anymore. You have to stop worrying." That was the first time he raised his voice to me. Just a little, but enough to make me quiet. After we hung up, I stared at the phone for a long time. The kitchen clock ticked loudly, and I could feel the space between us growing larger with every second. That night, I sat by the window again. Outside, the world was dark and still. I looked at the empty street and whispered, "I'm not angry, Daniel. Just lonely." Sometimes love feels like a rope that keeps stretching until you think it will break, but it doesn't. It just keeps holding on even when one side lets go. The year everything changed began quietly. No storms, no warnings. Just an ordinary winter morning with frost on the windows and the sound of the postman's footsteps crunching on the pavement. I woke early, as I always did, made my tea, and looked out at the street. The sky was pale and heavy, the kind of gray that makes you feel small. I don't know why, but that morning I felt something different, like a weight sitting quietly on my chest. I tried to ignore it. I went about my day, washing the dishes, folding laundry, watering the plants that had survived the cold. But by the afternoon, I felt dizzy. The room swayed for a second, and I had to sit down. My hands were trembling. I thought it was just tiredness, but the feeling didn't pass. That evening, I called the doctor. He told me to come in the next day. At the clinic, the nurse smiled kindly and said, "It's probably just stress." But after some tests, her smile faded. She said the doctor would call me soon with the results. 2 days later, the phone rang. The doctor's voice was calm, too calm. "It's nothing too serious right now," he said, "but your blood pressure is high, and your heart's working harder than it should. You need rest, Mrs. Turner, and company if possible." I thanked him, hung up, and sat at the table, staring at the empty chair across from me. Company. The word echoed in my head. I thought of Daniel. I hadn't heard from him in almost a year, not even on my birthday. That evening, I wrote him another letter. "Dear Daniel, I hope you're well. I'm writing not to worry you, but because I miss you. The doctor says I should take it easy, but you know me. I'll still try to do too much. I just wanted to tell you I'm proud of you. Always have been. If you have time, maybe you could visit, just for a weekend. The house feels big these days, and I'd love to make you that apple pie again. With love, Mom." I posted it the next morning. Then I waited. A week passed, then 2. No reply. I told myself the post was slow, or maybe he was busy with work, but deep down, I knew. Some letters reach their destination and still never get answered. The days grew shorter, colder. Every evening I'd walk to the window when the streetlights came on, hoping to see a familiar figure walking down the road. Sometimes I'd even imagine it. Daniel, in a dark coat, carrying a suitcase, smiling like he used to. But when I blinked, it was always just shadows. One afternoon, while I was cleaning the hallway, the phone rang. My heart leapt, but it wasn't him. It was Lily. "Mrs. Turner?" Her voice was as soft and polite as I remembered, but colder somehow. "Yes? Hello, Lily. How are you, dear?" After that phone call, something inside me softened. It was as though hearing his voice had loosened a knot I had been holding for years. For the first time in a long while, I didn't cry that night. I simply sat by the window and watched the snow fall, one flake after another, until the world outside was covered in white. When morning came, the house was silent, except for the gentle creak of the floorboards. I made tea, sliced a small piece of the apple pie I'd baked, and whispered, "Merry Christmas, Daniel." It was my way of sending love across the distance, invisible but real. The days after Christmas passed slowly. I didn't hear from Daniel again, but I wasn't angry. Somehow, that one call had given me enough. Maybe it was because, for the first time, I'd stopped expecting something from him. I simply wished him well in my heart. Winter melted into spring, the snow turned to rain, and the daffodils began to bloom in the front garden. I started taking small walks again, just around the corner to the bakery or down to the post office. People would smile and wave, and I'd smile back. There was peace in that simplicity. One afternoon, I decided to clean the attic. It had been years since I'd gone up there. The air was thick with dust, and the light from the small window painted everything in gold. I found old boxes filled with Daniel's school projects, little drawings he'd made, and his football medals. Each item was like a piece of time I could hold in my hands. There was one box that caught my eye. It was filled with Christmas cards he'd made me as a child, handwritten ones with crooked letters and little hearts drawn on the edges. On one of them, he'd written, "To the best mum in the world, I'll always come home for Christmas." I held that card for a long while. My eyes filled with tears, but I smiled through them. You meant it once, and that's enough. I decided to place that old card on the mantelpiece, beside the family photo. It reminded me that love doesn't always disappear. Sometimes it just gets quiet for a while. Weeks turned into months. One morning, as I was watering the plants, I heard the postman drop something through the letterbox. It wasn't the usual bills or leaflets. It was an envelope with handwriting I recognized instantly. My heart skipped a beat. It was from Daniel. I sat down slowly and opened it. His handwriting was shakier than I remembered, but it was his. "Dear Mum, I don't know how to start this. I should have written sooner. I got your letters, all of them. Lily kept them safe, but I wasn't ready to read them back then. I thought I was too busy, too grown up, maybe even too proud. But lately, I've been thinking about everything you did for me. The long nights, the sacrifices, the way you always believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. I'm sorry I stayed away. I'm sorry for every Christmas you spent alone. I can't change the past, but I want to come home, if you'll have me. Love, Daniel." Sometimes, when I sit by the window now, I still find myself listening for footsteps on the path outside. It's a habit I can't quite shake, but it doesn't come with pain anymore. It feels more like comfort, like a reminder of everything that has passed and everything that has healed. The house feels alive again. The rooms aren't just filled with furniture, but with laughter, with quiet conversations, with the smell of tea and home-cooked meals. The same house that once echoed with silence now hums softly with life. Daniel didn't stay forever. One morning, he told me he had to go back to London to finish some work. I felt the sting of goodbye, but it was different this time. There was no emptiness, no ache of uncertainty, just understanding. Before he left, he hugged me tightly and said, "I'll be back soon, Mom, I promise." And I believed him. After he drove away, I stood at the doorway for a long time, watching until his car disappeared down the road. The air was cool, the sky pale with morning light. I didn't cry. Instead, I smiled because I knew love wasn't measured by how often someone was near. It was measured by whether their heart found its way back. Over the following months, Daniel called often, sometimes just to check on me, sometimes to share something small, a story from work, a memory that came to him suddenly. Each call was a little bridge between us, built out of care and effort. It wasn't grand or dramatic, but real, and that was enough. When Christmas came around again, I decorated the house like I always did. The same wreath, the same ornaments, the same little angel on top of the tree that Daniel made when he was 7. There was something peaceful in keeping traditions alive. They made the world feel steady, even as everything else changed. That year, when I pulled the apple pie out of the oven, I didn't set an extra plate out of habit. I set it with intention, because now I wasn't waiting for a miracle. I was preparing for a memory, one that had already come home once before. In the evening, I sat by the window again. The snow had started to fall, soft and slow. I watched it cover the garden and the gate where Daniel had stood months before. The light from the street lamp caught the flakes as they drifted down, and the world looked quiet and kind. I thought about all the years I'd spent waiting, all the times I'd sat in that same chair wondering if love had an endpoint. I used to think waiting was weakness, that it meant you were stuck in the past. But now I understand that waiting, when done with love and peace, can be its own kind of strength. It means you believe in goodness, even when the world gives you reasons not to. Love, I've learned, doesn't always look the way you expect. It doesn't always arrive on time or in grand gestures. Sometimes it comes in a simple phone call, a quiet apology, or the soft sound of footsteps returning home. Sometimes it's just knowing that the person you love is out there trying to do better, trying to find their way back to you. And forgiveness, true forgiveness, isn't about forgetting the hurt. It's about freeing your heart from it. It's about saying, "You hurt me, but I choose peace anyway." I didn't forgive Daniel because he asked. I forgave him because I needed to breathe again. Because love, when held too tightly with pain, suffocates. But when released with kindness, it lives on. As I finish my tea, I look around the room. The photos on the walls, the letters in their box, the flicker of candlelight on the mantelpiece. Every object here holds a piece of our story, the loneliness, the hope, the forgiveness, and the love that quietly survived it all. If you asked me now whether I regret waiting all those years, I'd say no. Because in waiting, I discovered the kind of love that doesn't depend on being repaid. The kind of love that stays gentle, even after it's been tested. He didn't come home for Christmas for many years, but when he finally did, I realized something I'll never forget. It was never about the day he returned. It was about the love that stayed alive until he did. And so, each Christmas since, I light a candle by the window, not to wait,
but to remember, because sometimes the light we keep burning in hope becomes the same light that guides them home.